Good day, everyone. Welcome back to We're Talking Shift. Hey, in our last episode, Lauren and I talked about anxiety and depression. We did not put a lot of focus on the role of social media, which definitely plays a role. So today we're going to take a deeper dive into that part of the equation. But before we do, Lauren, first of all, hello. And what kind of feedback did we get from last week's episode? Because we covered a lot of ground.
We sure did. Hello, Lori. Good day to you as well. We are getting some feedback from our community. We absolutely love to hear from everyone. So join the conversation. If you have not joined the Weird Talking Shift group, we are on Facebook. So come find us there. If Facebook isn't your cup of tea, we're on other social media platforms as well. But this is where we're really digging into these episodes and talking about it more with the listeners. So find that Facebook group. We'd love to have you there. I did get some feedback though, Lori. One of our listeners says, I loved this episode, and the kids getting a little carried away with their freedom of expression and swearing is so relatable. My youngest is only 11. His big brother is in college. After Thanksgiving break, I noticed my youngest accidentally dropped a 4-letter word and told me his older brother says it all the time. Whoa. We had to lay some ground rules immediately with the kiddo and ahead of winter break for Mr. Potty Mouth. So immediately addressed it with the little one and let Big Brother know before he came home again. He can say whatever he wants under his own roof, but the rules under mine didn't change just because he moved out. What do you think, Lori?
Yeah, that's actually, I don't think we actually covered that. What about, yeah, older siblings that are already using language that, especially when the parents aren't around. And so the
Right.
younger ones are hearing it. Yeah, well, I mean, it is what it is. She's on it. She saw what happened. I assume she talked to him. She laid out the rules, and it is what it is. But yeah, that's another thing. It's not just like when they're at somebody else's house. It's what's going on under your own roof
Right.
with the rest of the family members. So everybody's got to know what the rules are.
That's right. I have twins. And so that's a grab bag of like good and bad, I think. And definitely parenting two kids the same age. I don't have to deal with different
Mhm.
boundaries for different age groups, but 11 years old and off in college, yeah, I mean, you have an adult and then you have a younger kid. So definitely different boundaries for different age groups. I don't know that I'd be able to do that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think for a college age kid, student, whatever, to be coming home and not actually sort of minding their mouth in front of their 11-year-old siblings is a, a little just thoughtless and disrespectful. So, really, I think as a parent, if you've got somebody that's still under the same roof and you have that situation going on, enlisting the older ones that maybe have a little more grace with their language because they're older, but enlisting their help and saying, look, you're older and I know you're talking like this, with your friends and blah, blah, blah. But we need your help to set a good example for your younger sibling because that's not appropriate for them right now.
Mhm.
So I think instead of putting this down as a hard and fast rule, which it should be, but that can kind of just sort of happen organically and maybe with less resistance if you engage their help and say setting a good example and helping us until it's more of an appropriate age for them to be figuring out their language and
Right.
who to have the language with. It's just
Right.
you were a kid, I was a kid. Your language around your friends, even at a fairly young age, is going to be different than it is at home, around your parents for the most
That's
part.
right. And this guy has been a big brother, we assume about 11 years now. He knows. He's setting the
Yeah.
example.
Yeah, he
All
should
right.
know better.
That's right.
That was
Okay,
just sloppy.
yes, get it together, big bro.
Yeah.
All right. This listener says, my parents raised me in church, and my wife also comes from a strict upbringing. Imagine the shock our parents felt when my 21-year-old daughter announced she was pregnant, but unmarried and not even in a relationship with a father. I guess with my hindsight, I'd tell parents not to totally abandon their parents' values, but ignoring what we were taught did not serve me and my wife very well. We never believed our kids would wait for marriage to have sex, so we didn't ask them to, but we also never expected a surprise pregnancy, so we didn't do much to prevent it. The baby is now 17 months old, and I've been having conversations about safe sex with our teen son. It helps to have a crying baby in the next room. I guess so.
Okay. Well, First of all, it's not like, and I'm not promoting or condoning, I'm not whatever, but a 21-year-old, it's not like a teen pregnancy if your 14-year-old, daughter came home pregnant and is not in a relationship. I mean, that might be a little bit more of a situation to be alarmed about, but 21, I mean, you're an adult. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting that this was a guy that wrote this in,
Yes.
and he refers to it as the baby and not my grandson or daughter, which
It
I
sounds
find
like parents are helping to raise this one.
yeah.
Lives under the same roof and all these
Yeah,
kinds of things.
the baby. They're helping to raise the baby.
Our baby, right? Everybody's baby.
Well, it just to me, I interpret that as a little bit of it's like, and maybe it's just semantics, but I would be referring to the baby as now we have my grandson or my granddaughter. I would, embrace that more because what a gift. I'm sorry, maybe it didn't play out the way you imagined it would play out, but now you have this opportunity and what I think is a gift to be part of the baby's life and help out your daughter, regardless of whatever circumstances got her there. Yeah, I mean, surprises have a way of surprising you. So it's just kind of, by the very nature of you didn't expect it. So I don't know. It sounds like it was a good opportunity for him, sure, to point out why it's good to be very thoughtful and responsible about those things with the younger one. And now, it is what it is. So deal with it.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, and there's a reason the word man is in the middle of semantics in this case, maybe. Maybe a grandmother would have written this a little bit differently, but
Perhaps.
that's okay. I do he brings up a good point though of we didn't want to enforce the values that our parents did, so we really didn't enforce any.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
is that concerning? Do you I mean, obviously we need to be instilling what our expectation obviously he had some. What are
Hmm.
our expectations for our children in our household or our
Sure.
adult daughter in our household?
Yeah. But there's no way of knowing had they done that things would have turned out any different. You
Mhm.
don't know that.
You're right.
So even if they had, followed suit and enforced the exact same values, the situation could have turned out identical to the way it is now. You have no, assurance that they would turn out different. You might
That's
feel
true.
differently about yourself because
That's a good point.
now they're thinking, oh, if we would have done this different, this probably would have played out different.
Mhm.
But you don't know that. Maybe, maybe not. So it's kind of a moot point by now. And now
Right.
you just take the opportunity if that is concerning you to teach the other one that's coming up behind and see what happens.
Fair point. I do
Mm.
have to say I have a little sympathy for this guy who wrote in because, of course, a grandchild is a lovely blessing. You can speak from that chair because you have one. I don't. I'm in the throes of parenting right now. So for me, I'm putting myself in his shoes of, you know, 10 years from now, if I'm thinking I'm heading toward like retirement and traveling and empty nesting, and now we got a baby in my house, I can sympathize with him on that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I get it. Depending on their circumstances, this could be throwing a real wrench in their plans. But
Maybe so.
I just think because it is what it is, and because that's the reality, how do you turn this into an opportunity instead of resisting it and having regrets? Because you can't undo anything, you can't change that. It's here, it's in your face, it's right now. So rather than bemoaning what you think, you should have done and didn't do that may have caused a different outcome, but you don't know. Just here's what we have.
We had another listener, Lori, who says, "Thanks for bringing up the thing about grandparents." She's talking about when I said that sometimes my children's grandparents criticize my parenting to my children. She says, "I've had to step away from my mother in law because she was influencing my kids too much." Now, this
Mm.
was really vague, Lori, but it got my attention because is she talking about the same thing that I was talking about, or is she alienating kids from family members because of a difference of opinion?
Yeah, that's a tough one because there's not a ton of information. Like, had to step away. What does that mean? Does that mean that they only get to visit when you're all together, or does that mean that, the kids can never see you, the grandparents? So it's a little bit vague. I don't know how to respond to that other than it would have to be to me a pretty severe interruption, influence, whatever that would cause me to step away from, my my mother-in-law or my father-in-law. Fortunately, I didn't have those issues. My in-laws are phenomenal. Couldn't be better. I can't that's a hard one for me to relate to even, but I would say, grandparents, if they're, if they're pretty normal grandparents, unless they are really extreme and rigid in certain ways, I don't know. I think that there's an important role for grandparents to play in their grandchildren's lives, and there's a lot of value there. So I would just hope that she's not like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as I say.
Right. I do think a lot of people who are my age or are parenting at the same time that I am spend a lot of time worrying about boundaries and maintaining their own peace within their own walls. And there's value in that, certainly, but at the cost of cutting off family members sometimes. And I do feel like sometimes it goes a little bit too far in that direction.
Yeah, yeah, and that's not a good thing. There's just too much value in having the support and the foundation of a family unit, however big or small it is. And grandparents, they play such a big role. And maybe, like you said, boundaries. Yeah. And I think a lot of that can probably be just worked out with some very, thoughtful, kind conversation about it. I mean, there's a lot of wisdom to come from grandparents. And I think because the nature of parenting and the trend of parenting in this last generation especially has changed so much, that there's probably a really big difference between the parenting that her parents did and what she's doing, especially what if she's like a super overprotective helicopter parent and the grandparents are like, oh, this is not good. You're smothering your kid. I don't know. So that would be something that I would want to pay attention to. You have to be open to be willing to consider that maybe what they're suggesting, even though it's different than what you're doing, maybe there's some wisdom there. Maybe there's something you could consider might be reasonable to, to try or to at least think about.
This ain't their first rodeo. And you were
That,
pleased enough with their parenting to marry their child and have a kid with him. So
yeah, yeah,
so what's the problem here, lady?
yeah. There you go. So two sides to every coin.
That's right. Now, our topic for today, Lori, switching gears just a little bit, we wanted to talk
Mhm.
about social media and its impact on mental wellness and just our lives in general.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan.
Yeah, I have a lot of mixed feelings, seriously mixed feelings about social media. And they span, the spectrum of really looking at all of the negatives and what I don't like about it, to, yeah, but there's all these other wonderful things about it that are such a great advantage to people. So I'm a little all over the map on it. But if we're going to focus on kids and social media,
Right.
and most of what applies to them applies to adults too anyway, but
Right.
but you know if we're talking about kids, I mean, what's up right now, I think, is the idea that people are putting forth of, can we make this some sort of a law that kids under a certain age don't have access to social media? So what would that age be? I mean, who
You're right.
knows? I don't know, but I my opinion, I guess, would be, I really don't see an advantage for kids under the age 16 and under. I think there's more harm than good that comes out of social media for around that age, 16ish and under, because they're not, really, you're not yet emotionally mature enough and strong enough to be able to let the garbage, number one, just roll off.
Mhm.
And that's a big part of it. That's why we have so much anxiety and depression that's related to social media from young people. There's, the statistics say that when asked what they're depressed about, most of them, the first thing is social media causes them to have depression.
Right. Or the
So,
effects of it.
yeah. So what they're seeing, what they're taking,
Right.
what they're consuming, what is being put forth, directed at them. And that's, a large part of that is because they haven't been around long enough and had enough life experience to guard their emotions, to know what's good for them and what's going to be beneficial for them to consume and what's actually doing them harm. They don't have the discernment yet. They're just not experienced enough. And even a lot of adults are in that place. But for sure, the younger generation, 16 and under, about. I mean, if you are a parent that has really got your finger on the pulse of things and you have trained your kid well about how to use this effectively and, what to steer away from, I'm sure there's exceptions, but for the most part, that would be my opinion. I don't know. What do you think? Are your girls are 9? Are they on social media? Do they have
They are
phones?
not on social media. We're not anywhere close to getting on social media. Their grandparents, actually, my former in-laws talk to me often and say, "We wish we saw more pictures of the kids on Facebook." I'm like, "Well,
Mm,
sorry guys, they're not on Facebook and neither am I." I have a Facebook page functional for the purposes of
yeah.
work that I've done, but I don't use it as a social media app and I have no plans to do so. So you
Mhm.
touched on some of the legislation, right? Some of these proposed um, laws to help us manage our children and their time on the internet. The Kids Off Social Media Act is one that has been coming up in conversation recently. Another one that we've heard about a lot is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. Both
Hmm.
of these are in agreement that age 13 is the threshold.
Ah,
13 children should be able to access social media. Something interesting too about this legislation is that I think most of the major apps already require you to be 13. And by require, I use that very lightly. Obviously, anyone can create their profiles, but
yeah.
13 years old. Don't we have better things to do at 13?
Yeah, I don't like that at all. I think that's too young. I think that's ignorant and I think it's foolish. Now, there's no reason for it. Why? For what purpose?
Well, I'm 35 and I can't come up with a reason to be on Facebook.
Right? Right? I mean, I don't know. It's just, there's a lot of, and I don't have those exact stats in front of me, but it's not hard to find. But there's a lot of data that supports the rise of depression and anxiety and all of those types of conditions related to teenagers. There's a direct correlation that has risen and it corresponds with the rise of the availability of social media and all these apps. I mean, it's just there. So, yeah, maybe it's not the cause, but it's happened in a parallel trajectory. So, I don't know. That speaks volumes, I think, because that's what has changed,
Mhm.
right? So, I mean, social media, it really became widespread in the early 2000s with like MySpace. I mean, I was never on there, so I don't know anything about that, but MySpace and Facebook were like the early ones to the
The
party, right?
pioneers.
Yeah, yeah, and then we had YouTube that came along in 2005, and then shortly after of the following year is when Twitter, now X, came along, and it wasn't till 2010 that Instagram made its appearance on the scene, and then right after that, Snapchat. And then the next biggest one was I guess only 8 years ago, was TikTok. So that was the newest kid on the block, so to speak. But you can see when you look at those dates and the rise of the younger generation coming up, knowing that this is available and this being part of their normal thing. It's just
Right.
normal. It's not something new for them. And it's not there's some pros. There's pros and but there's a lot of cons. And I think that if if you're really paying attention, you're going to want to do things that protect your kids from this because it's very invasive.
Mhm.
I mean, there's, obviously, well, like what we've said, there's mental health issues that have come along and risen at the same rate that these things have really become a regular part of not only of everyone's life, but of every minute of your day. It's that invasive. So I think we all know it's affected everyone's attention span. Everyone has gotten used to, tons of information, short clips, and just flipping through things quickly and not being able to focus on one thing for a long amount of time. So there's that. There's clearly tons of information that is just not true out there. So people are spewing all kinds of garbage or things that are misleading as fact, and that creates a lot of divisiveness and more polarization. So we know that by what's gone on with just politics and ideologies and all the other cultural issues, naturally the privacy and data concerns, and that's a big one. I think that a lot of people don't really put a lot of stock in that. And they're like, oh, I don't care. I don't have anything to hide. Well, it's kind of not really about that. I mean,
Mm.
maybe to a degree, but, you know, The reason that there's so much available free stuff out there. Oh, this app is free. Oh, this thing is free. Take this quiz. Oh, all of this is because they're collecting your data. And that is so that people can sell you things. I mean, that
That's
data
right.
is worth a fortune. So your information and your data that you're not really concerned about is worth billions of dollars to those that want it.
That's right.
So I don't know. I think that's just something that I'm not crazy about. The other thing for kids though is just being socially disconnected. So everybody there's this false sense of being connected through social media, but most of it is completely unreal. It's not real. And so the more that you're on this device and the less you are engaged with who you're with and who you're sitting with, or just at any given time just being by yourself, and you don't have time then to cultivate your imagination and figure out what you want to do, what you want to create, how you want to be moving through your day because you have gotten sucked into your phone. And that kind of social disconnection is a huge problem. So I think that that's something to be as concerned about as anything else, because kids need to be in community with each other. They need to be in conflict with each other and learn how to sort it out face to face. They need to be able to figure out how to be social with each other in real time, in each other's presence. They need to be able to, go and play and have fun together and do things and have activities. So the disconnection and then is really invaluable or valuable to know about, because it's affecting they feel lonely. They're around just as many people that the rest of us were around when we
Mhm.
were that age, but somehow they feel lonely and disconnected. So what is the cause of that, right? And then, of course, there's the obvious addiction. The phone is designed to addict you. And so you now can no longer manage your time properly because you have been lost in the addiction of swimming around in your phone all day, looking at
Right.
other people's stupid shit. And it's really such a colossal waste of time and life and your kids aren't aware of it. They're not prepared to handle that well. So you really have to be on top of it. Now, are there some good things? I don't know. Do you think there's anything good?
Don't. I certainly don't think the negative things outweigh the positive things. And I would also argue that social media alone is not the biggest issue. I think you touched on this a lot. Having it in your pocket, the availability 24/7 on the phone. I mean, kids nowadays open their eyes and grab the phone versus like going to the bathroom, brushing teeth, getting ready for the school day. You know what I mean? When I was in high school, social media was relatively new, but we had a lot of those websites you talked about. And it wasn't until like lunchtime that you could log in on a computer and take a look at your notifications,
Hmm.
or, after school, after you've seen all your friends and done all your
Yeah.
socializing for the day. I
Yeah.
think it was a different beast back then, just for the fact that it was on computers and they were in open spaces. A lot of times our computers were in the family room or a home
Right.
office. Phones, we take them in the bathroom with us, you know what I mean?
Right.
I think the cell phone the smartphone makes it a much different beast, but no,
Sure.
I see no redeeming qualities for social media, to be quite honest. I don't like it. I don't like anything
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing though. It's not going away. It's not going anywhere, except it's going to just continue to grow like it has been. So you can't put this genie back in the bottle, and that's just the reality of it. So, looking at what can be positive, what is positive, and then trying to manage yourself and your kids around this is really what you can do, because it's here. So, I mean, it is nice to be able to more easily stay connected to the people you want to stay connected to that are long distance, so it does help with that. There's that global connectivity that people like to have, which is, that's not a bad thing. Access to information is phenomenal. Access to information that is, beneficial to you, to be able to learn things and to be able to have all of this information at your fingertips. That's not a bad thing either. I mean, I really enjoy being able to learn stuff and get information that I want quickly. Clearly,
Let
this
me
is
give
the
you a
way.
downside to that one.
Oh, okay.
People get on a website, I'll use Facebook as an example, and they say, "What is this rash on my kid?" And this isn't the forum for that. Take that up with your medical doctor, please. It drives me insane to see how dependent people are specifically on Facebook. But
Mhm.
they're
Mhm.
very dependent on social media for information, and all of that information is available elsewhere. You don't need strangers on the internet telling you what's wrong with your kid or what's wrong with your dog or where's the best place to get a pizza tonight. Use Yelp. Call your friends and ask them. You know what I
Okay,
mean?
wow, you're a tough crowd. So I mean, I get the medical part. I don't understand why anybody wants to put medical information about themselves or their kids on social media. I don't get it. But
It's because the boundaries have gone so gray. It's
Mhm.
all so blurred. We're all so very open with our information now that
Mhm.
nobody stops to think, this is not the proper place for this.
Yeah.
And I think if we all just took a moment of reflection and do we know too much about each other? Yes, we do. My favorite ones are the ones that say, I have an unspoken prayer request. And it's like, you just spoke it. So what's going on? Because now you got 500 Facebook friends needing to know, are you going through a divorce? Is your kid swinging off the chandelier? What's going on in your life now? We need to know.
Yeah,
Don't be
yeah.
shy now.
I there's always going to be that percentage of people that just want the attention. Whatever, garners attention is what's going to happen there. It is what it is. But, I think there's some other good things, I guess, for people that creative expression. I think if you're building a business, I mean that's critically important now. If you're going to build a business, nobody's going to know you exist for the most part if you don't have some sort of presence online, unless you're just, going to be a corner brick and mortar something in your community, and that's okay too. But, there's some of that. But the constant connectivity and the instant communication, there's pros and cons to that. I think it's sometimes I really miss my old phone that was literally, attached to the house with a cord and right in the other room. And you had to actually go in that room to answer the phone and be
You
on
know
it.
what was nice about that is we could leave the house and no
Yeah,
one could reach us.
right. So, and, can we leave our phone at home though? Sure. But would
I
you?
think people panic if they
They
can't get a
do.
hold of you.
Well, and I think more than that, the whoever is leaving the house without the phone panics. And you get halfway down the road and you go, "Oh my god, I forgot my phone." And you turn around and go back and get it because now we're dependent on it. Like, well, what if something happened? How would I reach somebody? How
Right.
would I call, road service if I got a flat tire? How
How
would
did we
I,
reach road service?
right? So what did we do in the past before we could do that? You waited for some nice passerby to to
Now
stop
we're
and
scared of those.
right? So, yeah, I get it. But anyway, there's a lot of great information out there though that people can at least watch or read about and, kind of clue themselves in so that you are just more aware and you're not assuming that everything's fine, that your kid's not affected negatively. Because sometimes, things are going on right under your nose. You don't even know it until there's some sort of a crisis. So it's a good idea to at least clue yourself in, get educated, and then set up some boundaries. I mean, there's no reason that a kid has to have their phone in their room when it's time to go to bed at night. They should stay out in another part of the house and then they can have them if they have phones. I don't think there's any reason kids should have phones in school. I think that's bonkers. It's just nuts.
I will maybe disagree with you on that just because my kids don't have phones and a lot of the schools I think block cell signal from even working in the schools. But there have been a couple of times where there have been unfortunately twice at two different schools my kids have attended like intruder scares.
Hmm.
And I have really wished I could get a hold of somebody, specifically my child. So,
Yeah.
for that reason, for emergency purposes, I feel like I would want my kid to have a phone at school, but again, they're 9. We're not even there yet. So,
Yeah.
is that enough of a reason for me to supply them with said phone and send it to school every day? I don't
It's a
know.
valid
I don't know yet.
That's a valid point given what, has happened in schools. But do they have to have it on? Can there be a rule that, when you walk into the classroom, your phone goes over in this cubby or in your bag over on this shelf? So it's not like otherwise you have kids looking at their phones in the middle of class,
Right. Because
not
of the
paying.
attention span. You're right. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't sit in front of the TV and watch a show that I enjoy for an hour without checking my phone. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So people have become really addicted to not having to sit with their own thoughts. And so you pick up the phone and you distract yourself from your own thoughts, your own life, your own reality, what's going on with you right now, and you fill it up with other stuff that is completely inconsequential to your life. That's
Other people's thoughts about their children's
meaningless.
rashes.
Is meaningless. Yes. So it's a good practice to see if you could actually leave your phone in the other room or just turn it off and see if you could actually sit through a show or for time frame without looking at your phone. Can you pick up a book to read? Can you just sit and think about, future plans and what, goals? Is there something that's going on in your life that maybe you need to actually sit and give some dedicated thought to? Otherwise, when do you do that? When do you have that time to create your reality and your experience if you are constantly consuming other people's stuff? It's I don't know.
I agree.
It's just a lot of wasted time.
I agree. And you have been working with teens and you have written a course for them. In fact, have you observed anything on this topic with some of the teens you are working with? Do they have goals?
Yeah. I mean, some do, some don't. That's pretty individual. I wouldn't say most do or most don't. But I think the thing is that a lot of what's going on with a lot of teenagers is a lot of trepidation about what is next. So, you look at social media and you see everybody's highlight reel.
Mhm.
You see people that you feel like, somehow that's attractive to you. It's somebody that, is either looks a certain way or is doing something that you admire and you would like to emulate, but you think they're so far above me or they're so far ahead of me. How could I ever catch up to that? How could I ever be doing that, making that kind of money, looking like that person? There's this false reality that people put forth on social media. And when you are young, and you're seeing this as a teenager, and you're like, well, I'm not even sure what I want to do when I get out of high school. I don't know if I want to go to college. I don't know. There's all this uncertainty, but then they're seeing these highlight reels of things about all this stuff that people are doing, and they think that somehow they got to figure out how to get there too. And here's the thing, only there was a survey or an opinion tracker, I guess it was, there's a site called short for education, edchoice.org. And it showed that only 37% of teenagers feel prepared for life after high school, which is interesting. Now, that's the Pew Research, they do a lot of great surveys on trends. And what they showed was nearly half of all mothers say that they are extremely worried that their kids are going to struggle with anxiety or depression. Okay, so now you have over a third of kids that feel like I don't even know what's going to happen after I leave school. They're fearful. All right. And then you have almost half of the moms are like, I'm really worried my kids, I'm going to be struggling with anxiety and depression. So that doesn't bode well. What is causing that? I mean, when I was in school, everyone couldn't wait to get out and go do something. You couldn't wait to get out and go to work, or you couldn't wait to get out and go to college if that was your choice. You couldn't wait to get out and go do X, Y, and Z. There was no fear around it. There was no anxiety around it for most. It wasn't a thing. I'm sure there was a couple here and there, but for the most part, it was a sense of adventure and excitement and an eagerness to get on with what is next. Now, the generations and half their moms, and over a third are fearful and thinking, I'm not going to be prepared for this. And I think a lot of it is because of what they're seeing on social media. They think that there's a leap from where they are to what they're seeing on social media that they can't figure out how to bridge that gap, right?
Mhm.
So it instills a lot of uncertainty and fear that somehow they're going to be, failing. So Yeah, it's affecting in some of the kids that, that I've had the privilege to talk to and work with a little bit. It's a big thing. So that's why, the course is designed so that these kids can have an understanding about the power of their own goals, their own mindset, their own the belief in themselves, and to not get caught up in what's going on out there. So, it's obviously a lot more involved than that, but yes. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. I think we probably looked at the same study, or there have been several similar, but there was a
Mhm.
40-year, 4 decades of a study that came up with this notion that Generation Z avoids sex, alcohol, and driving. And while kids avoiding sex and alcohol may sound like a good thing, these are risky behaviors that our parents and grandparents were dabbling in when they were teenagers. Driving is just blowing my mind because
Mhm.
when I turned 16 in 2006, I was not only the youngest in my class, but I also failed the test the first time. So I was the very last person to get a driver's license in the entire world, it seemed. And when I finally was able to drive, it was earth moving
Yeah,
for me. And so for kids now to not want to learn to drive is so bizarre and weird to me. And I think you're right. They avoid risk because they'd rather sit in their bubble in their bedroom watching their phones. This is all very odd to me.
there is a trend though of kids not wanting to take on the responsibilities of being an adult that can stand on your own 2 feet. So,
Well, I
yes,
wonder if it's because we don't allow them to have the responsibilities of being
correct.
a kid and existing in society. Is social media replacing outdoor play and actual socialization in
Yeah,
person? In other words, Lori,
yeah.
are we overprotecting our kids in the world and underprotecting them online?
Absolutely. I think so. I think beyond a shadow of a doubt. And so they're afraid of the world because they've been so overprotected. They haven't had to use those muscles. They haven't had to figure out how to deal with things because there's this been, an overprotective bubble around them. And so they're not ready. I mean, to me, I agree with you, like back to the thing about learning to drive, to know that you can go out and learn to drive and then have that sense of independence. That was like the greatest thing ever. That's what you looked forward to more than ever when we were kids, just like you did. And that meant the next step into adulthood because now you have that kind of independence, way more than being able to hop on your bike. You can literally, you can literally go anywhere now. You can go to work, you could drive yourself to college, whatever it is. And so it is a mysterious trend that I find to be bizarre as well, that so many kids are no longer interested in driving. Now, it's easier for them to not have an interest or a drive to drive, if you will, because they have Ubers now and they have Uber accounts. So parents can just be like, yeah, here's your Uber app and here's the credit card. And you can just have a chauffeur basically
My
pick you up,
goodness.
drop you off at the mall or the movies or whatever, and then pick you up and bring you home. So now they don't have to borrow the car. The parents don't have to be bothered to drive them anywhere. And then the kids just use Uber and they don't have to learn to drive or, whatever. I don't know. Maybe there's some good things about that. I would not want to give up that sense of freedom
No.
personally. Now,
And I
there's
want my
been
kids to feel that as well. I would hate for them to be thrust into the world never having been outside my line of sight, which is kind of the expectation of parents now is, if you hear a news story of like a terrible thing happening to a kid, and it's like, well, why weren't the parents watching? Well, gee, because my child is 9 years old and I'm going to let her go play in the yard with a neighborhood friend
yeah,
because that's a normal developmental thing at her age, you know? If I'm
yeah,
going to put these kids in a car to drive at 16 or to the polls to vote at 18 or, send them out into the world at any point, we got to start somewhere.
yeah,
But I think a lot of parents are naive in thinking, well, if my kid is at home and under my roof and in the bedroom, everything's safe and fine, but it's not.
no.
It's not. They're exposed to all kinds of things you don't even know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not good. And I know that book, you had mentioned it, and I looked through it as well. The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt is phenomenal. And if you're not a reader, he's all over social media.
The
There you go.
worst.
But he's got some great interviews. He's been on a lot of podcasts talking about this very situation with what's going on. And he is also a big proponent of promoting unsupervised play with kids. You've got to give them opportunities to engage with other kids in this sort of unstructured world of play and whatever that means, make believe, depending on the age of your kids. But that's how they build resilience, and that's how they
Mhm.
learn to share, and that's how they learn to figure out when there's a disagreement, how do you get past it. So his information is really brilliant. He also believes we should implement phone free schools, so we'll see how that goes out. We touched on that, restricting access. If you've got kids at home, then there's no reason that you can't put boundaries and rules around when they get to use the phone. So be the authority and say no phones, no phones at the dinner table. I mean, there's just some obvious things. You don't need to have your phone sitting with you when you're having a meal together. It- this- Right? Or if you're
I
going to
agree.
watch a movie together, if it's
Right.
family night and you're going to, do something, whatever it is, there's no reason to not have boundaries. And for God's sakes, don't let them take the phone to bed with them. That is nuts. So there's a lot of things that you can still do right now that you have control over. So his book is called The Anxious Generation. And yes, we would highly recommend that. There's also a great documentary called The Social Dilemma. That's been out for several years and it's really good. That's eye opening. Every parent, every person, because a lot of what we're talking about affects adults too. The addiction and the waste of time, all of that. So the social dilemma is really informative. So educate yourself so you know what is going on, because this is because everybody uses it and pretty much everybody is got some level of addiction to it. So it's sort of this insidious thing that you talk yourself into believing it's fine, but it's very sneaky.
It is.
So I feel like, you really have to educate your kids. If you're not going to do it for yourself, at least do it for your kids. I think that social media should kind of be treated like dessert. You have it after you've had something nutritious. So, you've
And probably not every night or every meal.
no, it should be something, really it should be used as a tool. I think that's really the main thing. And so first of all, just to give people something to take away here. Discussing the pros and cons with your kids is really important so that they have an understanding of what this thing is, right? It's like a drug. It is addictive. It will steal your time. So it's also a thief. It will steal your motivation. And in many cases, especially for young people, it will steal your self esteem because you do not have the ability yet, the discernment yet to look at the stuff that people are putting on there and know that a lot of it is nonsense. A lot of it is not a perfect life. It's a little tiny clip that people want you to think is perfect. People are all about creating a perception, whether it's accurate or not.
Right.
Usually it's not, because nobody wants to put the crap up there. So they put the things
Right.
they want people to see. So, teaching them about that and teaching them that it's going to command your attention, because that's the whole point of it. So it's going to command your attention, and then it's not only going to command it, but it's going to steer it. It's going to take you over here and it's going to take you over there. And that's really important to know, because your attention is such a valuable resource. That's why everybody wants it, right?
That's right.
So,
That's right.
you have to become really savvy and informed about it in order to use it to your advantage and not be used by it. Another documentary, The
I
Creepy
haven't heard
Line.
of that one.
Yeah, that's a really good one too. So I would highly suggest people look into that. But anyway, I just think, as a final sort of period at the end of the sentence, again, thinking about it as a power tool, like you can use it to craft or build something, which is great. And like any good tool, You can use it, as a selling tool, a marketing tool, a PR tool. You can use it as a tool to build a brand. There are a lot of young people building businesses already because they have learned how to use social media to their advantage, right? And it's, of course, a way to stay in touch with family and friends. But again, if you don't know how to use the tool properly and safely, and if you're not hyper aware of the potential harm, and learn to proceed with caution, it will hurt you. It will. In fact, do you know how many people injure themselves every year from mishandling a tool? I read something that said almost 40,000 people end up in the emergency rooms every year due to injuries from nail guns. That's
Oh
just
my
a
goodness.
nail gun. I've heard people end up in the emergency room with something called avocado hand because they have cut their hands because they're cutting avocados in a certain way.
Oh, no.
That's just one tool with one basic function. And social media is a tool with a lot. It's like a Swiss Army knife, right? So as many ways as there are to use it to your benefit, there are more ways than that for it to be used against you and
Yes.
to harm you. All right. So treat it like a power tool, learn how to use it, understand it so that it works in your favor and you're not going to be the one being used by it.
Exactly. Is it serving you or are you serving it?
Yes,
Lori,
ma'am.
one last question for you. If there is a parent who is listening to this and say their kid is under 16 maybe
Mhm.
and is already kind of too deep down the social media hole, is there a way to walk that back for your kids?
Of course, if your kid's a minor and they're living under your roof, you just lay down some laws.
Period.
It's not that hard. I mean, it might be hard, but it's not complicated. It's called rules. It's called taking the authority that you're supposed to have if you're the head of the household. If you are the parent, that's you. So, yeah, there's if you've let that get away from you, well then just don't keep letting it be out there, just letting your kid do whatever they want. Then lay down the law and enact some rules and explain why though. Don't just be like, "All right, here's the new law. No phones after, 8 at night. No phones over this, mealtime. No, blah, 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 blah." If you're going to rescind privileges that they've already been accustomed to having, then you need to go about doing this in a informative, mature way that helps them understand why you're doing it. So reel it in, but just do it in a, like, what do they say? A tough love kind of way.
Absolutely. My kids love, now that the days are a little bit longer, going outside and playing soccer after dinner. And that has just become a part of our day at this point where, if it's raining outside or we otherwise can't go, it's something that's missed. And I would just implore some of our listeners, if it's been a while since you've played outside with your kids, go play outside with the kids. Take the pets with you because they're getting a little rambunctious over here on my side of the screen. Go outside and play with your kids. It's so much fun, not just for you, but for them. And another thing, if you take your kids out somewhere, we like to go to the park too. One of my favorite things to do is to sit on a bench and look around and see how many parents are looking at their phones.
Oh, yeah, for
It's
sure.
bizarre. If you go to a waiting room, go to a doctor's office or, wherever you need to be, and you look around the waiting room,
Yeah.
everybody's looking at the screen. It's not just a problem for the kids.
No, no. Any public place that you go, and I see this in airports all the time, everyone has their nose in their phone. A line at the store, a line at the post office. Yeah, any public place, everyone's nose is buried in their phone. So, yeah, see if you can actually have the presence of mind to go, "I'm not going to do that.
Mhm.
How did I ever live without this in my hand, looking at it 24/7? Don't be used. Don't be the tool."
I agree. Play
Right?
with your kids, talk to your kids. They're cool people.
Yeah, I
Mine
love
are.
that. I love that note that you brought up because it is really important. Your kids should be outside playing as much as possible, and you should be out there with them. I think a lot of people have gotten to the habit of letting the phones become the babysitters too,
Exactly.
so that they can do whatever else they want to do. And that's
Exactly.
not cool. So anyway, I think we covered a lot of ground here today, and hopefully you all found this of interest. Check out some of those resources that we talked about. If you want to find out more about the course that I created, you would head over to tlccourse.com. or you can just go to my website, loreebischoff.com.
We are on social media. Come find us. You're there too. Come find us. The We're Talking Shift Facebook group is the best place to continue this conversation, and we hope you will. But we'll talk to you again soon on We're Talking Shift.
I feel kind of hypocritical now.
I know. I know. It's a necessary evil at times. We're
All
building a
right, everyone,
brand here.
go, go make some shift happen. See you next week.